Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. And so, many would say the pathogens were evolving. Maybe it was the pathogens, maybe it was us as an industry evolving. But we saw our first outbreak and recall associated with the non-0157 E. coli. So we call them the non-0157 STECs.
Hello, meat folks. Welcome back to the MeatsPad podcast. This is your humble host, Phil Bass. And we have two amazing folks joining us right now, great leaders in the meat industry. Dr. Mandy Carr with National Cattlemen's Beef Association and Dr. Barb Masters with Tyson Foods. Ladies, how are we doing this morning?
Good morning, Phil.
Doing great, thanks.
A little chilly. It is certainly a little chilly. Winter has settled in here in northern Idaho, and I believe around the rest of North America. But that's okay because we're in our comfy offices right now, and we're going to have a little visit. So, both of you, if you don't mind, first off, good morning, Team Beef, if we could say that today. If you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your professional roles, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the topic at hand.
Great. Well, I'll get started. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, Phil. So I am currently the Vice President for Regulatory Policy for Food and Agriculture at Tyson Foods. I always figure if you have a long title, it sounds really important, right? But I really focus on regulatory policy for our entire company. And so that's what I do today. But my path here was a little bit different. So I'm a public health veterinarian. Worked for FSIS for many years, pretty much in every role from in-plant veterinarian all the way to the administrator. Left there and worked at a law firm. I say all law firms need a veterinarian on staff, but focused on a lot of things, but in particular became very excited about working on beef safety across the industry and using data to improve beef safety. Left there and became the global head of a food company for food safety and stayed there until I now work at Tyson. I find that I love extracurricular activities, sit on a lot of boards, food safety education, Center for Foodborne Illness, but one that's really a big passion of mine is the Beef Industry Food Safety Council, where I've been an active member and served as the chair in 2021.
Thanks, Barb. Really, my career is a little bit varied as well, and I think probably many people find that they find their way along the way. I started out after graduating from Texas Tech. I went to Angelo State University and worked there with other faculty to build a meat science program and build a federally inspected meat laboratory. I really found my passion in teaching and really enjoyed that, but a great opportunity came along a few years later, and it was to come to the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and lead their beef safety research program, which was one that was funded through the Beef Checkoff. So there I've led beef safety research and then transitioned over into leading a team of great scientists and consumer scientists in our Department of Scientific Affairs, where we have beef safety research, product quality, sustainability, human nutrition, our outreach with health professionals on beef's role in a diet, but also our consumer market research. It's given me a chance to continue to really learn all about beef and the consumer, but it lets me keep my roots in beef safety as I also serve as the administrator for the Beef Industry Food Safety Council. And then we lead a nice little event called the Beef Industry Safety Summit every year, which Barb has also been involved in.
Well, that's great. And you know what, for folks out there listening, if you've never met these ladies, understand that the credentials go on quite a ways. We have some true experts here on the line with us, especially in the beef food safety realm. So with that, we know that beef safety has been a critical component of the beef industry for many years, and to most now it's even considered an expectation, I would say. But it hasn't always been that way. So can you walk us through a bit of the history of how the commitment to beef safety has evolved and how BIFSCO is kind of the abbreviation for that Food Safety Council, how that plays a role?
Yeah, so I'll maybe start with a little bit of the history and then let Mandy talk a little bit more how BIFSCO interacts and intersects with that history. I think if you got a lot of experts in the room, some of us might jump on and say, 1885 started all this when we found salmonella. Others would debate and say, no, it's 1975 when E. coli 0157 was first identified as a pathogen. But I think it's safe to say you could have all the experts you wanted, but all of us would probably agree that the real change started in 1993 when we had a huge outbreak of E. coli 0157 in ground beef from a fast food restaurant. That led to a lot of changes in the industry, the regulatory agency. From the industry side, that was the first time we really got together. The Beef Checkoff funded a Blue Ribbon Task Force and really worked to find data gaps and research needs to improve beef safety. I was a regulator at the time, worked in the regulatory agency, and we were very busy as well based on that outbreak. That outbreak led to the agency in 1994 identifying that E. coli 0157 was going to be declared an adulterant, and they were going to begin sampling for E. coli 0157. I think what most people don't think about, because you have to put the timeline to really get there, is that that happened prior to the agency requiring HACCP plans. So in 1996, the agency required all plants, including beef plants, have HACCP or food safety plans in place to improve their processes. That led to the industry, now that they had E. coli as an adulterant, they had food safety plans, really looking at post-harvest interventions. But at that time, what we really had was hot water and steam vacuums, so not a lot was available to us. In 1997, after these regulations were put in place, BIFSCO was actually formed, and I know Mandy's going to spend a little more time on that. But the sad part was, in spite of all these efforts by the industry and by the regulators, we had several large outbreaks from E. coli 0157 over the next few years. When I say large, I'm going to give some context because that wouldn't happen today. We're talking 25 million pounds, 18 million pounds, so really large outbreaks, even with everything that the industry and the agency were doing.
Yeah, I'll add on a little bit. So BIFSCO, Beef Industry Food Safety Council, as Barb mentioned, it's a membership organization of industry executives, beef producers, university scientists, government scientists, and a lot of experts along the whole supply chain with really a focus on beef safety. And they have a really strong mission that we can talk about in a little bit. But one of the key things, as Barb mentioned, in 1997, when they were established, it really was to bring together all that expertise and focus on what could be done after the Blue Ribbon Task Force and some of these other instrumental moments had happened. When you bring together, how does that work with the Beef Checkoff and what the Safety Summit is? The Beef Checkoff is an assessment that's collected $1 every time a beef animal is sold. And those funds then are utilized to fund things like research, promotion, consumer and industry information for marketing, and producer communications. And then organizations like NCBA and several others are proposed work to do and become a contractor. So through the NCBA's beef safety proposed work, we fund things not only like research, we would focus on pre-harvest. We also have this event called the Beef Industry Safety Summit, which we plan in collaboration with BIFSCO.
So there's a lot of folks working on this topic. A lot of folks trying to make sure that food is safe. And my day job is teaching at a university, and oftentimes I have to give a history lesson as to just how safe our food really is. And Barb, I really appreciate that background that you just provided of kind of the history of how we've come about for those who are maybe newer in the meat industry, where HACCP is just something that has to be done. Realize that it was not a mandatory requirement at one time, and so now we've come a long way. Food is extremely safe, but there's always more work to be done. So anyway, back to kind of like the timeline. If I'm right, then I think this takes us up to right around 2010 or so, and it was at that time we saw a bit of a shift in the pathogen that was the sole focus for years. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. And so, many would say the pathogens were evolving. Maybe it was the pathogens, maybe it was us as an industry evolving, but we saw our first outbreak and recall associated with the non-0157 E. coli. So we call them the non-0157 STECs. So we saw that outbreak and recall. And so the regulatory agency recognized the need to step up, announce that they were going to declare these top 6 non-0157 E. coli's as adulterants. They picked the top 6 based on their relationship to causing illness. And then in 2014, they actually formalized and made that a new regulation. They also updated their testing. As bugs get smarter, we have to get smarter. So they updated their testing and started using whole genome sequencing so they could better find when there was humans that were ill, the source of that contamination and trace it back in through the industry. Certainly causing us as an industry to have to work harder to make sure we were producing that safe product. In addition, not just on non-0157 E. coli, there was also a lot of focus on salmonella. Certainly it had been around, but the regulatory agency started putting more pressure on salmonella. They updated their performance standards that they had in ground beef and introduced new salmonella performance standards for beef trimmings. So that put additional pressure on the industry to make sure they were controlling those pathogens as well.
So, okay, so now how did these changes impact the annual Beef Industry Safety Summit then?
Yeah, when you look back with this timeline, the first safety summit was actually in 2003. And obviously, with what was going on at the time, it was focused on 0157. So it was the E. coli 0157H7 summit actually at the time. And looking at those challenges, outlining steps forward, additional research, and really started that collaboration across different sectors. Then over time, it gradually evolved. And one of the things that was really critical, I think, and still holds true to today is the attendees of that very first summit signed a pledge to consumers. And it outlined this commitment that the industry had to reduce 0157. Then, as you worked along, and Barb talked about, we still had some recalls and we were still working through opportunities with research and really started to develop this multiple hurdle approach. And you hear that term. I know even when I was, first starting teaching, coming out of grad school, I heard the term multiple hurdle approach, but I didn't really understand what it truly meant in the industry with the work that is done within the plant, but also through research and academia, really looking at those interventions post-harvest. As Barb said, something beyond just water and steam back. How do we have things that would actually reduce the likelihood of pathogen would make it all the way to the final product? And then over time, we started looking back into the pre-harvest area as well as what could be done in the management of cattle over their lifetime to reduce the likelihood of pathogen would be at a level that those interventions within the plant wouldn't be able to be successful. So really had this evolution. And then we reached the 10th anniversary in 2012, and that really focused on bringing that research to light, looking at then also what are companies doing within their own plant and how can we share that. The unique environment of the Safety Summit, but also the group, BIFSCO, is they determined that safety was not competitive. And if someone had key insights, that we wanted to make sure that those insights were shared across the industry so that improvement in beef safety can be made overall. It hurt everyone when there was a recall or an outbreak. So that pre-competitive, non-competitive nature of beef safety has really carried us through advancements in technology like whole genome sequencing and antibiotic use and stewardship, all the way to last year in 2022 was the 20th anniversary of the Food Safety Summit. So it was nice to see, 200 attendees gather and really reflect back on the progress, but also stay focused on the future and what are the challenges we need to continue to address.
So Mandy, can you tell us how you and NCBA and the Beef Checkoff and BIFSCO all work together to plan that annual safety summit?
It's really a great opportunity for all of us to continue to learn from each other. So part of NCBA's contract to the Beef Checkoff is to facilitate and host this event. But we know it wouldn't be possible without the partnership and expertise of the members of BISCO. So as I said, those are individual companies and their staff that are really involved in producing safe beef on a daily basis. And they then have an executive committee that is selected. They elect a chair on an annual basis. And then we utilize that group along with other members of beef safety industry to really identify the topics, identify the speakers, and really work together to form that relationship to have good, timely content every year.
So, okay, well, Barb, my understanding is the you were the chair of the Beef Industry Food Safety Council in 2021, and have been involved in the planning committees for many years. What have been the key topics that you are most proud, or that you would really like to stake your flag in and say, look at what came from this council?
Yeah, Phil, I'd have to say it's just such a great opportunity when you get with this group and you start planning the summit, and we push one another and we debate one another. And, you know, as Mandy said, it used to be the E. coli 0157 summit. And ironically, we never let go of that. We never want to become static and say we've accomplished it. So we always keep something on our agenda to move forward on E. coli 0157. So you can say to your students, we have the safest beef supply out there. But we also want to look at what's coming at us. So for me, over the last several years working on that committee, some of the things I'm really proud of, I'll start with the technical. It's a technical conference, and that's salmonella. We've continued to hear in the news about salmonella and the relationship to our food. And so we've really, as an industry, said, what can we do relative to salmonella at the summit? Research, data gaps. How can we share best practices to improve our beef related to salmonella? And the last 3 summits, we've had full days that covered salmonella as a topic. We even had a workshop where we had the testing platforms come in so we could better understand what methods were available to us as an industry so we could improve our beef safety. On the soft science side, that's the other thing I love about the summit. We don't just stay technical, but the planning committee went to Mandy and the group and said, you know, we'd really like to get students more involved. And the group was open to it. And so we started travel scholarships last year at the meeting. We had several students apply and we were able to select about 12 of them, very competitive. They come from all different schools and they got to meet one another, share the research that they're working on. They got to meet the industry leaders. And we didn't just have them come to the meeting, we made them present at the meeting. We had a panel. And we got to ask them, what drives you? What is going to make me at Tyson? How am I going to get you and attract you into my company? What drives you? And so it was a really good two-way dialogue. And so we're adding on to that this year. We're keeping the student scholarships, but we're actually going to get the students involved in our planning group so they can have more interaction with us, help shape the agenda, because they're the future leaders for our industry and we want to make sure they're part. So as you're working with students, encourage them to apply for our scholarship.
No, you got it, man. I love that you're inviting and embracing the next generation, because you're absolutely right. They are the next leaders. They are the next decision makers that will continue on with this amazing mission that you guys have. So, and speaking of the mission, you know, Mandy, what should we expect about the upcoming 2023 Beef Industry Safety Summit?
Well, we're really excited. You know, we had the 20th anniversary last year, so you always want to do something, you know, that was a really great event and historic for many of us that have been involved for a long time. But this year we're adding a couple of new things, which really builds on feedback from attendees, which were the students as well as the professional members. And one of the key new things is that we're also adding a travel scholarship for young professionals. So to Barb's point, we had such success in doing this for students and really engaging them in the conference planning and having engagement with industry professionals. But so we thought, well, how's the best other way to continue this generational transfer of knowledge in beef safety? And so we wanted to add BIFSCO is sponsoring scholarships for young industry professionals. We have our applications available. If anybody hasn't seen that, they can feel free to email bifsco@beef.org, and you can get that information for the student or for the professional scholarship. And again, trying to have that opportunity to hear from different groups of individuals that may have different perspectives, may have some really great ideas that we haven't thought of. So we want to really engage them, and then continue on the successes of things like, yes, focus on salmonella as we see that topic continue to evolve from a regulatory perspective, but also from a scientific perspective, share those key insights. And then we have a few other little interesting surprises that we'll be announcing in January. So stay tuned. Watch the bifsco.org website. You can get more information, or feel free to send us an email if you're looking for the application for those scholarships. And then we'll be announcing also the selections for research abstracts that we'll be making selections in January, early February for those as well. So we're really excited about the content.
That's awesome. So just to remind everyone out there, if you want more information, especially, I love the idea of the professional scholarship. Sometimes it's not, I mean, we got to get the students there, but there's a lot of younger folks that are in the industry that really need to get up to speed as well. So BIFSCO, BIFSCO @beef.org, reach out via that email. And Mandy, can you remind me what is the date of that summit?
Yeah, so we're going to be April 3rd through the 5th in Kansas City this year. So everyone, the BIFSCO website will continue to have information as we release the early agenda and all that, hotel, all those good things will be right there on the front page of the website. So it'll be real easy to find. And we look forward to having those folks that have enjoyed the meeting in the past, but also new attendees that want to come and learn a little bit more about what the industry is doing, and hear some updates from our research experts and our technical experts on advancements in the field of beef safety.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, you know, and I want to ask one more question of you guys, if that's okay. Just because I'm trying to document every person that's ever joined us on MeatsPad. How'd you get into the meat business? How'd you get into the meat industry? What drew you here?
So my story, I would say I graduated from veterinary school and did a food animal internship after I graduated from Mississippi State. Didn't get a lot of exposure to food animals, but was interested in it. So went to Kansas State, where we obviously have a lot more food animals. Did my internship there, left there and was working in the swine industry actually, and went to dinner with a colleague. She was working in the federal government, and I was looking at a job in the federal government because I felt like public health, the combination of food safety, public health, was really intriguing to me. And everybody talks about the government jobs, and her response to me was, it's everything you make of it. And I took her on that challenge, hit every job along the way, and just absolutely loved it. But again, just continued to grow and not only work with the regulatory side, but also with the industry side. And so just really fascinated by that combination. We call it One Health, you know, the animal health, food safety, and human health just truly fascinates me, and I enjoy every minute of it.
Yeah, that's great. Mandy?
I grew up in agriculture. My dad was an ag teacher. And so I grew up, you know, the traditional things you think about, showing livestock, being on judging teams, leadership teams, and have always known that agriculture was my home. But I didn't really know what was all my choices. But my dad was one who had learned about food science, and he thought, you know, that might be right up your alley. It's a combination of the really geeky science stuff that he thought was just really nerdy, and I found really interesting to learn all the chemical composition of everything. So I found my way into food science, and worked on projects like fat replacers and cheesecakes, and thought that was my future. And then I got a micro project on pork carcasses, and I from the pork checkoff, and I found that research and discovery and trying to resolve challenges was something I was really interested in. So that led me down the path more on the meat science side, and then really focused in microbiology. But I knew I wanted to teach. Both my parents were teachers, and that was really a passion. So I transitioned into academia, and I really enjoyed my time there, teaching students, seeing that learning process, and being actively involved in teaching lab and all those fun things. But over time, you just find that there's things that just spark your interest. And then when I transitioned to NCBA, it really was about engaging with the industry and hearing what the challenges were and being on the front side of identifying the pathway, and then getting to work with scientists to use their expertise to really develop studies and work through those outcomes. So it's been a nice landing place to get to be involved in many different parts, stay a little bit of teaching and learning and research, but also get to engage with some really great industry professionals that teach you every day something new. So yeah, the tangled path we weave, but sometimes you wind up in the right place.
That's right. Well, and the meat business, the meat industry, the meat family, it is a tangled web. We tend to interact quite regularly, but not as much as I'd like to sometimes. I'm very much more of an operations and marketing sales kind of guy, and so it's good to get some food safety input here. And honestly, for those out there who are more on the operations and sales, just remember, if it's not safe, it is not saleable, and so we have to have that guarantee for the customers out there. So ladies, thank you so much for joining today, and let's stay in touch.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Phil.
Phil.